and welcome to the latest edition of the Friends of Dave podcast. Recently relaunched it, and I'm getting a lot of great people from my network that I'm having join. And today I have with me Meg Murphy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a marketer. I got my start in Boston. I started out at the Aberdeen Group, an analyst firm in Boston, and moved pretty quickly over to a company called Maxwell Health. Since then, I've kind of spent my entire career really loving the startup marketing sort of world. At Maxwell, I was their 30th employee and their second hire on the marketing team. And for about the entire time that I was there, about 4 years, we were a really lean and mean team, about 2 to 3 people, depending on kind of the season in the business. That business doubled year over year, and it was just an addicting sort of swan song of a startup story, and really gave me an opportunity to kind of wear many hats depending on the day, which I absolutely loved. After about 4 years there, I had an opportunity to move out to Chicago, which is where I am now. Again, working with a small startup. I was about the 10th employee here, started on the communication side, got an opportunity to dabble on the sales side, actually, which was a new and exciting opportunity. So I ended up building out some sales assets for them, started doing some demos, really understanding sort of how sales processes work, and learned a ton. After that, I moved over to G2 Crowd, formerly G2 Crowd, now G2.com. I led their rebrand last year, which was sort of one of the most exciting projects I've had an opportunity to work on. I also was doing a lot of PR work there. And most recently, I was at a company called MirrorPost, which is an email marketing automation tool. So again, in sort of the MarTech space, marketing to marketers is always a fun challenge, especially in a space like that moves so quickly. They unfortunately had some layoffs at the end of last year, right over the holidays, that I was caught up in. And since then, I have been working on some side gigs, working on some freelance projects. The most notable side gig, and the one I think that we're going to be talking the most about today, is a little project I started called Chicago Superstars. So that was an idea that I came up with after I got laid off. My layoff was more of a position elimination, right? So it wasn't like a bunch of people got laid off at the same time. It was kind of just a pick off, which was really isolating and kind of scary. And a few weeks after that, some of my friends over at G2 were affected by layoffs. There were more layoffs sort of across Chicago at different companies. And so I decided, it's time that we all kind of get together. So Chicago Superstars right now is a public talent database for folks that are searching, as well as a community of job seekers, people that are secretly searching. I have some people that I've kind of designated as Chicago connectors. So there's a group called Sales Assembly in Chicago that works with kind of, I think they've got like 150 of the top B2B SaaS technology companies in the area that they work with from a sales and marketing perspective. And they've been incredible about sharing resumes and connecting people. Got some recruiters in there, and it's kind of snowballed. It's been a really exciting trip.
Yeah, no, I again, that's why, we're talking today. That definitely caught my attention. I want to take a couple couple steps back though, because you said some interesting things in your intro to everyone. Well, first, obviously you started your career out in Boston, and so what caused you to say, "Hey, listen, I'm going to leave family, friends behind in Boston and go out to Chicago"?
Yeah. It was you just cut me right to my core just there. That was definitely a really tough decision. But something that I was kind of ready to do. I was ready to kind of move away from it. I've lived in New England my entire life since then. Grew up in Connecticut, went to school in Maine, lived in Boston for about 4 years. I was ready to kind of push my boundaries a little bit and get out of my comfort zone. I was at Maxwell at a time. I just saw some incredible growth there, both personally and from the company's perspective. And I think the company had changed quite a lot. They actually got acquired shortly after I left. So I think the work had changed. I was ready to kind of move on to my next opportunity, and the founders of the company in Chicago found me. They were looking to move into the same space that Maxwell was in. They needed some help pivoting their positioning and messaging and building the right relationships in that space. It's in the insurance and employee benefit space, which is a really niche industry, very relationship driven. So they really needed somebody to help them kind of understand the industry and make the right introductions. So they recruited me over the course of about 4 months and made a pretty compelling offer for me to kind of jump and explore a new city. So Chicago wasn't really on my radar, but it's been great.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, if you're picking a city, there's a few across the country where you could say, if you're going to go from Boston, there's a lot of young people, there's a lot of energy. It's a great place to be. A lot of history there.
Exactly.
So I commend you at an early stage in your career being willing to take a risk. I mean, that's definitely something that folks sometimes hesitate to do.
Well, I think that's the time to do it. That was part of my decision process. Is I was like, I'm not dating anyone in Chicago or in Boston. I don't have kids. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have people relying on me. Like, if there's ever a time to take a risk, now is the time. So that definitely factored into my decision too. Like, I think long term, I'd love to get back. But for now, things are really great in Chicago. So
yeah, and so the other thing that you said when you were talking, and we spoke a little bit beforehand, but we didn't cover this part, was the fact that you spent some time in sales. I love that. And we didn't talk about that. So talk to me a little bit about, because here's the thing, I have this, and folks who know me and talk to me know that I have this kind of theory about why people don't like marketers. And in part, people don't like marketers. I wrote about this. I actually wrote a post where, marketers don't understand what it's like to actually sell something. They don't. Most marketers are all focused on the science behind marketing. They're focused on click rates. They're focused on SEO. They're focused on all those metrics, right, that you can geek out on around marketing.
Totally.
But they've never actually had a quota. They've never actually had to go and do the do what it takes to actually sell the product. It's easy to tell somebody a script or tell somebody some messaging, but they're not doing it. So what I think makes marketers, and I speak from my own experience as starting out in sales and actually having moved into marketing myself, what were the real reasons, not the interview reasons, the things you might say in an interview with people? What got you into sales in the first place? Like, what got you?
You know what? Yeah, honestly, I think part of it was it started at Maxwell too. Like at Maxwell, I was constantly on the road working very closely with the sales team. I think there's a few interesting things there. Number one, at Maxwell, so like when I was really cutting my teeth in marketing, our team was held to a quota. So we were constantly tracking leads in the door, what's actually closing. I was in a really fortunate position to be the person on the road oftentimes, be the one that was going to these trade shows, making that initial pitch, and really being able to test sort of what works and what doesn't. And being held to that quota, I think, definitely made a difference in terms of like being able to test what works. And I think sort of by virtue of being on a small team, we didn't have the luxury of getting caught up in the details that didn't convert, right? To be totally honest, there's probably a lot more that we could have done from an analytics perspective. And I don't consider myself much of a like analytical, like marketer. Like, I mean, I hold myself to analytics, but that's not sort of what drives me. What really drives me is like, how can I get in the head of the person that we're trying to get in front of? I think it was a pretty seamless transition, honestly. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that like, I'm not interested. And I'm not interested in doing work that's unimpactful. And I think by virtue of working in a startup, number one, you have to have the full sort of picture in mind at all times. And just working at a 10-person company, like it's all hands on deck, right? You just jump into whatever you need.
Yeah.
So I think
everybody's got to be a salesperson,
jump.
and everybody's got to be a salesperson in a startup. I mean, your engineers have to be salespeople in a startup. It's all about getting bringing the revenue and keeping the lights on and all of that.
Absolutely.
And what I've found in my own career is that I've seen an intersection actually where the people that are really successful in marketing in particular are the ones who understand the overlap between sales, marketing, product, and business development. That's partnerships. Because it's telling that story and trying to convince people to actually come on board and do that. And there are a few people that can kind of jump into each of those areas and kind of succeed and excel or enjoy it. I've talked to a lot of people who've, been in marketing and then like sat with the sales team or sat on a sales call and go, wow, that's really hard. I don't know if I could ever do that. I don't know if I'd want to do that. I don't want to, I don't like the rejection, right? What did you find? What did you find that was the most difficult for you when you were kind of filling a sales role? What was the most difficult thing for you? Was it the rejection, or were there other things?
Well, so I would sort of qualify this as like, I mean, I got a bit of rejection, and I actually did some BDR work at Maxwell as well. So that's really where like the cold calling rejection, that sucks. That's my heart goes out to those BDRs that do that all day. That's a hard job. But at Healthjoy, I was really in more of kind of a channel sales role. So it was a distribution partnership kind of a deal where we signed on our first partner, and then I was really going out and going to each person and saying, okay, what clients do you have? How can we get in front of them? So, I don't know. I think the rejection is definitely hard. But I think the hardest thing has got to be kind of like keeping in mind kind of those quotas and knowing that every case is going to be a little bit different, and trying to keep in mind sort of the prospects like challenges and mindsets, and they might not be ready, especially when you're working with somebody who is trying to sell what you're selling to someone else. You've got to keep in mind the seller's challenges and what they're working through, and then also the kind of end person that you're selling to, which is number one, I think a lot to keep in mind. And especially when really my goal is to get things across the finish line, you got to get really creative. So that's definitely something, sort of digging in and doing that research up front was something that I had to pick up and learn quick.
Yeah. So now, we kind of transition. You had mentioned during your, when you moved out to Chicago, you took this risk, you joined this company, and then end of last year, you see this staff reduction, which sucks. And now you're out and, you're away from your family and your friends and all that stuff. And so you're starting to think about, okay, what do I do next? And how do I get a job? And how do I, particularly where you might not have the most strong network, how do you take this sales experience that you had and start to kind of use that and your marketing experience, obviously, but how are you rolling that forward? Is that where Chicago Superstars kind of came to light for you? How did that all go?
100%. That's exactly where I was. Chicago is a much bigger city than Boston, a much friendlier city than Boston, which I think worked in my favor. But that was 100% it, right? Like without a deep network of my own, how do I make the most of what I've got? And honestly, at Chicago Superstars, it started as like, let's sort of crowdsource some networks and let's see if I can lean on other folks as they're kind of moving in the same direction, even if they might compete with me directly for roles. So that was sort of thought number one. But thought number two was like, how can I do something creative and out of the box to effectively just drive traffic to my website, right? Something that's like super low lift. I didn't want to spend much time on it. I didn't want to code anything. I didn't have any money. So how can I do something that's free and creative and meaningful? I think that's the biggest thing, where if I'm trying to work on this problem, how can I sort of help people solve it along the way with me? So Chicago Superstars, it's a Google form. It's 2 Google forms, one for recruiters and folks hiring, and one for candidates. put it together in probably 3 hours through a landing page on my personal website and did a LinkedIn post or two, and it absolutely blew up.
That is, I think that's amazing. And I think, one of the things that I think people, and I'm hoping people who are listening to this that are part of the Friends of Day community and because I write a lot about this kind of stuff is, you just said, I got to do this. I got to be creative. I got to solve a problem. I'm not going to be afraid of whether it works or not. I'm going to try it and see what happens. And you went ahead and said, I've got to build a network. I'm going to try this and let's see what happens. And what happened was, it sounds like it started to take off much bigger than you thought it was going to do when it first started to happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the first week, and I think credit to LinkedIn's algorithms here, in the first week, I got probably 60,000 impressions on those few LinkedIn posts. And the community, like the people applying to join the community, it absolutely snowballed. After that, Crunchbase News reached out to me to talk about layoffs and the shame behind them and the communities that we're starting and the spreadsheet sort of culture that happens after layoffs. Business Insider reached out to me. It's been ridiculous. And I think looking back, like probably would have invested a bit more time in the Google forums had I known. It's
Craigslist.
awesome.
Craigslist has been around for a long time, and it's probably the crappiest interface ever. So I don't think I think you're probably in good shape, I would say.
I appreciate that.
But so everybody's clear. Basically, what you did was you said, "Look, I'm looking for a job." And correct me if I'm wrong, by the way. I just want to make sure everybody understands what this is about because it's so cool in terms of how this all came about. It's basically like, I'm looking for a job. I know there's other people here in Chicago who are looking for a job. How do we all get together and help each other? So I'm just going to create a Google Doc and give me your name, give me your email address, give me your phone number, maybe, right? I haven't actually gone on the doc. And so it's like, do all that and like, let's just help each other.
Yeah,
is it more complicated than that, or was that basically it?
I mean, that's basically it. But so I think that the other kind of big piece here was there's a lot of shame around layoffs, both for companies that are laying people off and for people that have been laid off, right? Like, my head was spinning and it took me about a week really to process it. Like there was definitely a period of shock where I was like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I don't know what you're talking about. And then a period of like, oh my God. So I think number one, there's a period of like processing that needs to happen. And then there's a lot of shame, right? Like how do I, going into an interview process where I'm definitely trying to put my best foot forward, like how do I position this layoff? Because in the back of my head, I'm thinking like, what does it say about me as a marketer that I'm not mission critical to a business, right? What does it say from a company's perspective, right? Like they don't want to be seen as a company that's not doing well, right? Like layoffs, they send all kinds of messages and there's all kinds of speculation that happens around it. And a lot of it happens in your own head. But I think that's the other interesting thing is like there's shame that happens, but there's also an opportunity in that most people that are job searching have to job search secretly, right? If you're currently employed, you don't want your current employer to know. So you can't really market yourself publicly. And I was kind of thinking, you know what? Actually, this layoff, there's a silver lining here in that I can treat myself as my own product to market and help other people do the same thing. So I think I'm seeing the same thing now too, especially as more layoffs are coming with the pandemic that we're all dealing with, is people are taking a few days to even announce that they're searching, just because they need to kind of work through it. And it's really helpful. I'm getting this feedback kind of over and over again, is that it's really helpful to be part of a group, even virtually, where everybody's in the same boat.
Yeah. And I think, what's interesting too, and why I wanted to talk to you and have you speak to the community of people that get my newsletter and that are part of my network is there is a generational difference. And what I find refreshing about the younger generation is that you're able to put the shame aside. It's hard, but you're able to say, look, let's work through this together, right? People that are older or further along in their careers are they've got mortgages, they've got kids they got to put through college, they've got, this thing and that thing, lifestyles that they built up around their jobs. And what's happening is that they're feeling the exact same way, but they're
Yeah.
not actually willing to go out and say, you know what, I'm going to show some vulnerability. I'm going to say I need some help. And what that does is that creates additional problems for them on a mental health perspective, and also in terms of
100%.
all the same self-doubt that you were talking about, particularly if you're somebody who is with a company for like 20 years, 15 years, and all of a sudden your job has been eliminated or your company is scaling back. You're in a situation now where you're saying, okay, well, where's my value? What can I do?
It's so scary.
But what I really like about this is you're saying, look, you know what? We all go through it. Whether
Yeah.
you got to worry about paying your rent or pay your mortgage, we all got things that we're worrying about.
Yeah.
Let's work together. And how many people would you say is part of the Chicago Superstars? What's the demographic makeup? Would you say, is it mostly younger people, earlier stage careers, or do you have people throughout different stages, kind of reaching out to you?
Yeah, I have been really shocked at kind of the demographics. My only qualifier right now. So when I started off, I was like, do I want to keep this like just to tech people? Like, what's the
Hmm.
qualifier? And I very quickly kind of realized, you know what, these are all people that need help. They're all searching in Chicago. So really, that's my only qualifier: is you have to either be in the Chicago area or you have to be looking in the Chicago area, right? If you're about to move here, great.
Hmm.
But in terms of the demographics, it's really been across the board. I've got people that have just finished up their first internship who their position has been been eliminated. I've got people kind of like me, about 5-7 years in their career. I've got people looking for CMO, CFO, executive positions that have been doing this for 20 years. I really have. I mean, the resumes are incredible from some of the top companies. I mean, I've got people that have worked at Google, people that have worked at WeWork, like incredible resumes all across the spectrum.
Hmm. And so, people are seeing that there's some power in all of this and coming
Hmm.
together. And so for you, like, what does this do for you? Like, it started off as pretty practical. Hey, I got to try to
Hmm.
build my network. Now you've got probably a bigger network than you ever thought you were going to have. And
Yeah.
people like me who you never knew all of a sudden reach out to you
Yeah.
and say, hey, listen, I think what you're doing is pretty cool. Or Crunchbase, or Business Insiders reaching out to you. Like,
Hmm.
what is this actually doing for you right now? Like, is it on a personal level, and then what do you think on a professional level?
Yeah, on a personal level, I think, like you said, there's definitely some vulnerability here, and like I mean, I come from an Irish Catholic family. Like, vulnerability isn't something that I've been trained to do, but I think personally, this has been a really good practice in vulnerability over and over again. And number two, I think, is like you talk about whatever the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, I'm getting my community here, my sort of fulfillment in feeling like I'm helping people. Like, there's a lot of really good things that comes from building this on a personal level. On a professional level, I think it's exactly what you said, right? Like, my name is the first one on our list. Every email that I send out to my recruiters, I let them know I'm still looking, because you know what, it's my email list. Whatever, I
Right.
can.
Right.
So I think from a like traffic perspective on my personal website, and getting like, it's ridiculous how many more. I can't even. I don't even know the analytics right now, but the traffic has been amazing. The visibility for my own search has been amazing. I've gotten tons and tons of opportunities and interviews out of this, like both from a freelance basis and from like a let's talk and see if there's a fit for us at
Hmm.
as a professional. So the other interesting thing, which has kind of dried up since the coronavirus, is I've gotten a few people that are interested in helping me like monetize this. I had a few recruiters that have said, like, we own the demand side of the recruiting situation, but there's not much that's going on the supply side, right? Like, there's tons of support for recruiters and tons of support for HR teams that are trying to hire people, and lots of tools because they have the resources, right? But for folks that have just been laid off, that's a really scary financial position to be in. Um, and there's not a lot for people that are job searching,
Right.
not meaningfully and tactfully. Like, there's tons of content, but there's not a lot in terms of like, if you don't have any money and you can't pay a career coach or a resume writer or whatever else,
Right.
it's tough. So that's kind of the other thing that I'm aiming for.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we're at a unique time in history right now
Aren't
with
we?
the growth of social. Well, not just with what we're dealing with on the pandemic side, but
Yeah.
I'm talking about in terms of technology and where we're
Mm,
at this inflection point where the job search, as you pointed out before, used to be something you did under the radar. You didn't
under
really
wraps.
talk a lot
Yeah.
about it, or and there weren't a lot of resources to you to help you. And even now with LinkedIn, a lot of it's being broadcast at you. And there's
Mm,
not stuff that is actually helping you get some traction to actually
mm,
make something happen, which is what we all want, right? And so again, I think this idea of leveraging communities is really interesting in
mm-hmm.
how it will help us kind of transform the job search process going forward. Of
Yeah.
course, there's
That's
going to be more technology applied to it, and there's going to be machine learning and
of
algorithms that are
course.
going to be able to connect people better, right? But ultimately, to close the business, it's got to be people to people. And I think that what you're doing is actually highlighting, putting the spotlight on the fact that this is something that we all have to get more comfortable with going forward. Would you agree?
100%. I think that's the power of the community too, is like going back to that sort of vulnerability piece, right? My roommate is a therapist, which is like
Hmm.
the single best thing ever. And I was talking to her, yeah, live with a therapist if you ever can. But I was talking to her about getting laid off and my feelings around it. And I was trying to think of like, man, how can I spin this? How can I talk about these hardships, and how do I spin this so that it like looks like I'm great, you know? And she's like,
Hmm.
people don't connect to that, right? Like if you're trying to put up this facade of like I'm the best candidate ever and like don't worry about that layoff, like that doesn't feel genuine. That doesn't feel authentic to people. What you should
Right.
be doing instead is like leaning into some of that. And I think that's really the power of the community, is that we're all in the same boat. And what we're seeing is like I've set up different channels in here where we have like a referral channel for like I'm applying to this company. Does anyone know anyone? Or like a due diligence channel where I've gotten an offer from this company. Is there any red flags or things I should know? Right. And I think even though these are a lot of people that have never met and probably won't ever in person, um, the the real power of it is, since we're all in the same boat, there's kind of a community level vulnerability where people are really excited to help each other out,
Yep.
and you get that connection just organically.
Yep.
It's been awesome to see.
Yeah. No, it is interesting how we often forget that part of it, right? It's like you have this transactional part of the trying to find a job. Oh, or I've got to get a job, whatever. But also when you're trying to help somebody, it's what it does for you on the inside, right? It's like
Yeah,
I'm actually feeding my soul a little bit, where I know that somebody else is out there because I'm having showing empathy toward them, because I would want that if it happened to me,
there's
right?
some good
And
fuzzies in here.
yeah, right. So actually, that leads me into something I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, was
Yeah.
around your thoughts on how brands can build communities around some of the stuff that we're
Mm.
talking about, around vulnerability and around empathy. And and this is something that you do professionally, but you've also kind of done it organically with this. What are some things in your mind that you've learned through this whole process with Chicago Superstars that other people should know about, that will help them build communities around their brands, or whether it's corporate or even their personal brands? What are
Mhm.
some things that you think that people should take away from this?
Yeah, I think the first thing, having built communities before and doing this now, I think the first and most important thing for anybody trying to start this is to start small. I think about Reddit as a great example of a community that has kind of there's some split. I'm not sure what it is of people that are creating content and having meaningful conversations, and then the people I call lurkers, right? People that are just kind of there to like see what's going on, but not doing much in terms of actually submitting or making the jokes that makes Reddit such a fun community. Um, and I was thinking about that pretty heavily as I've created communities in the past and as I was creating Chicago Superstars. So, at, like when you get it started, there's not going to be a lot happening. And it takes a lot, I think, from a moderation perspective in terms of getting people talking, in terms of asking the right questions, in terms of sort of hand selecting people, because you'll see kind of, even today, I see people in my community now that I've gotten sort of a good kind of group in there, is that there's certain people that will be much bigger participants than others. Don't know if that's a like whatever introvert extrovert thing or people that are really stoked about it. But I think starting small is key, and starting with the people that are most likely to engage. Community building really isn't about reach. It's really more about engagement. So if you can start small, get the conversation going, create something meaningful, even on a small scale, and then sort of open up the floodgates, but slowly, right? So something that I've been thinking about as I've been building this out, it's built out in Slack, but getting people to build that muscle memory to engage. So the first thing, whenever anyone opens Slack and is invited for the first time, they get a welcome email from me saying, this is who we are, this is what it's all about. You also get a Slack bot right away that says, hey, here are the top channels that you need to pay attention to. Right now, go introduce yourself in the intros channel, join the hot jobs channel, see what's going on in there, join the referrals channel, see if you have anyone you can make intros to. And I'm really pushing people to get moving. And then as a moderator, I'm constantly trying to ask questions, add resources. What else do you guys need? It takes a lot. It's not just something that you can kind of like open up and go.
Right. No, actually, while you're saying that, I was going to ask you a question about that, because I think, well, first, I think there's a really important lesson there. I think a lot of people get hung up on, okay, I want to get from 0 to 60 like tomorrow. And you're like, it doesn't happen that way. It does take a little bit of time. Now, granted, what's happened with you has happened pretty quickly. I mean, how many, again, I just remind everybody, how many people do you have as a part of Chicago Superstars at this point?
I think I'm up to like 175. Yeah. And I think, I guess it's bigger. So I've got 175 candidates, 175 like people that are searching, and then a much broader community in terms of, I don't even know what the numbers are.
Right. It's probably, like, it's probably much larger than you do. Look, there's those lurkers out there that, that are interested. I don't live in Chicago, but I know about your community, right? So it's happened very quickly. The point is, it's happened very quickly for you, but it doesn't necessarily, you don't go into it thinking you're going to have 175,000 people day one. You go into it thinking, if I get 1 to 2 to 3, and I start to double from 3 to 6 and whatever, it will work, right? So that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't think about when it comes to these things. And I know I'm actually having some conversations with folks right now where I'm trying to tell them that, like, don't worry about, how this is going to look, or don't worry, just get going. Right.
Yeah.
Then the second thing is I think you said that I thought was interesting and that I'd love to jump into a little bit more, is that in order to get engagement, it doesn't happen just organically, in the sense that it like naturally happens. You have to put some thought into it. When somebody joins your Slack group and the Slack bot tells them these are the channels you should be paying attention to, who was behind that? Who was behind telling the Slack bot what they should be telling them? Is it you?
That's me.
Right. The point is, it's like you were thinking about this, and you were thinking about the user experience. And again, I think a lot of folks don't really think about that. Is, when you have these interests, you got to kind of like lay the breadcrumbs for people so that they actually do the engagement. So again, it sounds like one of the keys to, community building is really understanding the community and kind of personifying the people that are a part of that community, so that you can create opportunities, content, things that they're going to keep them engaged. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, totally. I think, I mean, I think about how hard networking is, like going to networking is for most people, right? It is scary as hell to walk into a room full of strangers and like make the most of it. So that's something that I think that the online community actually has a bit of an advantage over, is there's kind of a level of trust and anonymity that comes from being an online person, but there's still some scary things about being like, hey, I want that job, or hey, maybe I can help you, or hey, here's who I am. So giving people icebreaker style questions, giving people some guidance around like, hey, here's what a good intro looks like go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And giving them that encouragement and kind of validation when the engagement happens. So a great thing that I love about Slack is that there's all these whatever emoji responses where the entire community, when you introduce yourself, people are saying, hi, oh my gosh, great to meet you. Love that company. Here's how I can help. Like the validation and the engagement that the rest of the community gives is a really, really helpful thing. And I think starting that from the minute you join is really important.
Yeah. And again, it does take some thought on your part to kind of seed those conversations. And how often are you kind of engaging with your community? Are you sending out, are you doing a post on Slack once a day, multiple times a day? Are you sending emails? How are you engaging with the community to keep them kind of coming back?
Yeah, I'm in there every day, and most people are. I mean, it's gotten to the point now. When I first started it, I was in there like once a day probably, and especially when it was small, I was kind of saying, "Hey, I just had a conversation with a recruiter at this company. They've got these open roles, like little things like that." Now, first of all, I'm not the only one that's engaging every day, so I think we've gotten some kind of community norms, although they're not codified or anything, about how engagement works and the kind of information that would be helpful to people. So first of all, like there's other people, sort of other Chicago superstars advocates that are jumping in and asking questions and doing a lot of the things that I was doing pretty aggressively at like sort of at the middle stages. And that really happened organically. It wasn't like I was reaching out to these people and being like, hey, can you step up here? Like I think people saw the value, saw what they were getting from it, and were excited to help. The most exciting thing that I'm seeing is like after people have gotten hired, I'm getting messages from people saying like, I just got hired at this company. We have a ton of open roles. Frankly, I want a referral bonus. Can I stay in the group? Can I continue to help people out? This is an awesome resource for me. How can I give back? So that's been great. And I think especially people that have gotten hired, those folks coming back have really turned into some of my advocates just organically.
And so I guess with regards to this community, I mean, what's stopping you from doing it in other cities? I mean, we talked a little bit about this before, but I think everybody would be interested in your thoughts on that. Like, why can't this be Boston, New York, Austin, Texas, San Francisco? Why can't you have superstars in all those areas?
I can. I think the biggest thing is like, I want it to be authentic. So I think the way that I would have to do it is I would probably want to get like people that are local, people that are searching in those markets to help me launch that. I would be happy to like literally copy and paste, like make copies of my applications and set that up. And I'd love to talk to people if they're interested in setting that up. Right now, the main thing that's stopping me from doing that is just time. I'm doing this on my own. I'm job searching mostly full time. Like my full time job right now is job searching, and I've got some freelance gigs. So I think there's a million things that I could do with this. And I'm just trying to do it one at a time. But I'd love to talk to people if they're interested.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that actually leads to the next question I was going to ask you is, kind of moving away from Chicago superstars, like what are the other things you're thinking about? Sounds like your job search right now is really what you're thinking about. Like it's kind of top of mind for you.
Totally. That's the main thing right now. It'd be great to have health insurance right now. That would be really good. So that's definitely sort of my top priority. As I'm thinking about sort of moving forward, though, I do feel like I have a responsibility to this group. And whether that means passing off certain things to other people that are excited to step up, or whether that means trying to automate a lot of this stuff once I have some income coming in and I can afford to pay for the right integrations and the right tools to help me really make this seamless. I mean, it's got to keep going. So that's that's something that I'm continuing. In terms
of
has
this whole thing, how has this whole thing impacted your job search? Like, how is this, like, are you talking about it when you get an interview, or are you talking to somebody about a gig? Like, what's been happening?
Totally. Yeah, totally. I think, I mean, one of the other main reasons that I set this up at the beginning was to like show off what I can do, right? And show off how I'm thinking about things. So, I've built communities at prior companies, and that's always been something that I've really loved doing. So part of this is showing that like I can build communities, right? Part of this is showing that I can build websites. It's showing that I can tell stories. So as I'm thinking about the things that I'm doing to promote superstars, I'm also trying to align it with what I'm good at and show off a little as part of the job search. So I think definitely, especially the press coverage, right? Like I'm looking at PR roles. That's huge.
Right. Yeah, it's true, right? Like, hey, I'm a professional, marketing professional, a PR professional. Well, I'm showing you all this stuff because I'm doing it. Actually, I'm doing the PR. I'm getting the the discussions going. I have a website. I put the website up. And one of the things we were talking a little bit about before we jumped on this on the podcast was maybe, don't you think it, in a really weird way, some of that could be working against you? Because the idea is like, I'm doing all this and I'm showing you that I'm great at this. But if you come, and maybe this has happened to you, maybe you've talked to some folks where this has happened, where it seems like in your mind it's a great fit, I could help them, whatever, and then they back off.
Mm-hmm.
Has that happened at all to you at all, in some of your conversations, or have you sensed that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of tell. I've definitely run into it in prior roles where I've said I've got this great idea and like let's do it, and I've gotten some hesitation from either bosses or bosses that are like I don't know if we want to be that vulnerable, or I don't know if that's a big risk and I'm not sure about that. So yeah, it's definitely, I've seen it in my career. It's gotten me into some trouble, I'm sure. It's also worked really, really well. So in a past role, I won't name companies or names, but I had a past role where I had a boss that was really nervous about G2 reviews, right? Like let's get customer reviews and go public with this. And the concern was, oh man, like what if these reviews say things that are really bad about us?
Right.
And these were concerns coming from kind of my boss's boss, and my boss was just like, you know what, just do it, like run with it, do the campaign,
right.
Let's see what happens. We were able to get like 25 reviews in 2 weeks, got on a leader quadrant, got all these awards from G2. It was incredible to see the traction, and it ended up giving me like it took sort of that kind of just do it mentality to get my boss's boss to kind of say like, whoa, that was incredible. But it's a risky thing. And I think it definitely, it's definitely gotten me into some trouble, but more than it's gotten me into trouble, it's been what sets me apart. And I think part of what I'm thinking about as I'm job searching is, I think probably the biggest thing I'm thinking about as I'm job searching is finding alignment with bosses, right? It probably is going to be a really intimidating thing to manage me if you're somebody that wants to play by the rules, right? And we have a playbook and this is where we need to go, right? But I'm a big believer as a marketer that you have to get creative. You have to think outside the box. Frankly, I hate old school playbooks and I'm not interested in unimpactful marketing. And I think that's something that has really served me well in the spaces in my career where I've had the autonomy and the trust to like try things, and sometimes I fail, sometimes I don't. But learning quickly and kind of iterating quickly. So for that's something I'm looking for in my next role, and I think it's serving me really well to be really honest about the kind of marketer that I am and the kind of jobs that I'm looking for. If that's something that's intimidating, it's not a good fit.
Yeah, no, that's a great, taking that kind of stance, I think, is really important. And I totally agree with you in that. Look, for somebody like you, and again, speaking to some of the audience that is in my network and that get my newsletter, we're among those people that are having people like you come on the team and you say, okay, I've got this resource that can think outside the box and can make suggestions that could be risky. It's our jobs to kind of manage that, and harness it, but not stifle it. And unfortunately, what happens, and it doesn't just stop there, it goes all up and down the spectrum.
Of course.
People get worried about the risk and, oh my God, if we're wrong or if we make a mistake, what's going to happen? And then what they start to do is they look at the folks that are willing to think outside the box and they say, they're hard to keep contained. And
Mm-hmm.
so you run into these situations. I've had the same thing happen to me in my career,
Mm-hmm.
where you get into the situation where you're like, wait a minute, is it me or is it them, or what's the story here? Should I change how I'm approaching things? And of course,
Mm-hmm.
you got to have be aware, right? You got to be aware of a situation, or you got to be self-aware. But we need creative thinkers. We need people who aren't afraid to make mistakes. We need people who are willing to innovate. You know,
Mm-hmm.
those are the things that are going to be valuable moving forward. And so I hope for you, you don't doubt yourself, because it's really easy to do that. You don't doubt
Mm-hmm.
yourself, and you lean into this whole idea that I created this community out of nothing. It didn't exist. I saw a problem. I created a solution. I'm self-sufficient. I haven't been afraid of making mistakes. And look at how this thing has kind of blossomed. I can do that for you and your firm. If you,
Mm-hmm.
all I need from you is just to work with me and coach me
Yeah,
and help get
100%.
this out of me, right? So don't
Mm-hmm.
let that change. Don't let that change you. And it's easy to get discouraged, because you go
Mm-hmm.
and you talk to people, and you'll talk to 3 people, 5 people, and it's just not connecting. But I think you said the right thing. It's like you got to also go, well, it's just not the right fit, and it's
Totally.
not going to be good for you if you find that the wrong company that's not going to appreciate that.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
anybody who's listening right now, Maggie is looking for a job, and she thinks outside the box. And I even said to her before, and I'll say it again on this, marketing is just one stop along the way for her. I think there's a lot of things she can be doing for organizations that will that can benefit them, and so I wouldn't just pigeonhole her as the marketing person or the community person. I think this is somebody that, with some nurturing and some coaching, can actually can do a lot of other things that can be impactful in an organization strategically.
I
So,
appreciate that. Thanks,
yeah.
Dave.
Yeah, well, look, it takes a lot of courage to do what you've been doing.
Thank
So,
you.
look, we're getting toward the end here, and what I
Mm-hmm.
like to do, and we'll see how this works, is I like to kind of do a little bit of a word association.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, and we haven't, it doesn't necessarily be one word. It's just about, so that people get to leave you and leave this conversation where people get to know you a little bit better. So,
I'm
I'm
ready.
gonna, you ready? First
Okay.
thing is rowing.
Oh, starboard is my word. I'm a competitive rower. And I'm a starboard side rower, and I also love sculling. So starboard is my word
And how
association.
did you get into that?
I started in Chicago. I started the day I moved here. I drove with my dad across the country. He helped me move in all day, drove him to the airport, and I started my first day of Learn to Row in Chicago as a way to make friends and get in shape. So yeah,
Hmm.
started here. It's always something I wanted to do. I'm also, you can't see this here, but I'm 5'11". It's kind of, I've been told that I need to do it my whole life. So here I am.
Wow, there you go. Okay, and what does it feel like when you're out there? And do you do it? Where do you row? Do you row on the
Ugh.
Chicago River? Do you row? Where do you row?
Yeah, so I am a member of Lincoln Park Boat Club. We have 2 boathouses, one on the Lincoln Park Lagoon, which is right by the zoo. It's beautiful, right on Lakeshore Drive. And we row on the river as well. We have a boathouse on the south side in Bridgeport. And oh man, it is amazing. We row it just as the sun's setting at night usually. And it's the most meditative sport I've ever been a part of. It's a very team. I've been a competitive swimmer for most of my life, but I started rowing here, and it's really interesting being not only part of a team sport, but a sport where every minute action that you do in a boat, the entire rest of the boat can feel it. So you really have to be focused and locked in on your rhythm in every part of your body. It's really a practice in mindfulness, and the rhythmic sort of rowing. It's, as the sun is setting, it is poetic. I
Yeah.
absolutely love it.
Yeah, I have to say that it's interesting. I have not done any kind of competitive rowing, but what I did do at one time, I got into triathlons, and I was
Mm.
swimming. We even talked. You and one of my sons were competitive
Hmm.
swimmers, so I kind of
Yeah.
got a little into some of that. And I was surprised when I had never been a swimmer. competitively or anything like that. But the whole idea of the mindfulness that goes along with the swimming, I got to imagine you're getting some of that with the rowing, where you're in the rhythm, you're kind of just focused, you're not thinking about anything else, you're just in the moment. Doing that, I think, has got to be therapeutic for you.
Yeah, it's funny. I think swimming is, at least for me, I did it from when I was like 5 years old. Swimming is one of these things, like swimmers talk to themselves in their head, and it's like you get songs stuck in your head as you're doing all these laps. So ideally, you'd be focused the entire time. But rowing, I found, is a very different thing, because not only like can you hear other people, but you have a coxswain at the end of the boat that's talking the entire time and telling you and calling you out if you're out of rhythm, or giving you feedback the entire time. So it's the first sport that I've really been able to like swimming. You can get lost in your thoughts, and rowing, you have to turn your thoughts off.
Yeah.
It's completely different.
Okay. So I got another one for you. Ready?
Let's go.
Startups.
Ooh, chaos is the word I would say. But I also thrive in chaos. So I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah, I like to tell people, and again, this is somewhat generational. I've worked in startups, and I've worked at large public companies, and I've had a lot of people along my career say, who've been at large public companies for their, most of their career. Oh, it would be so fun to be at a startup. Oh, I think I could totally do it. I'd kill it at a startup.
Yeah, the metaphor of like we're going to jump off a cliff and build the airplane as we're falling is like so true at startups. You feel it every day, where they're like, nobody knows what we're doing, but we hired some smart people, so we're going to figure it out. Here we go. Which I loved, but it's definitely not for everybody.
Yeah. Okay, last one. Dream job.
Oh God, like now?
Dream job.
Dream job. VP marketing. I feel.
So if you could be anything in your whole life, VP of marketing is your dream job. Is that what you're saying? Like when it's all said and done.
I mean, now you're making me feel self-conscious about it, but yeah.
Awesome.
I think I am. I mean, we were chatting a little bit about this before. I am a geek. I really am. Comes to marketing especially, but like I've never been somebody that like will get interested in something and then like let it go. I'm a big believer. The knowledge curve where you like you learn a little bit about something and you're like, oh my god, I'm an expert at it, and then you turn a corner when you learn just enough and you realize like, oh my god, I know nothing. I have always been the kind of person where I get really excited about turning that corner and digging deeper and deeper. And right now, I love marketing. I think it's important for me to be at the right kind of place and working with the right people. But I love tech. I love SaaS. It's really important to me to feel like I can have an impact on people. And one of the reasons I loved Maxwell was I felt like it was a platform business where even if I wasn't a doctor and able to save one person's life, maybe in working in this technology company, I could affect millions of people's lives. And that's a pretty cool thing. So, I mean, I'm also a big believer in like aligning what I've got with what will make the most impact. And I'm not a doctor, and like running an ice cream shop would be cool, but like, it's not really where I'm going to be able to make the most impact.
So I ask a lot of people,
that's what I want to do.
Well, a lot of times I'll ask people in that position, well, why not CEO? Why wouldn't you want to be CEO?
I would be a CEO, sure.
There you go. So that maybe the dream job isn't VP of marketing. Maybe it's CEO. I think you could be a CEO. I mean, I think there's a lot of leadership. There's a lot of leadership qualities that you're exhibiting now at this stage in your career that just transfer when you get a little bit more experience. I guess the point of the question. Well, the point of the question is not to get you to think, okay, what's this one step in front of me? Your dream job could be years down the road or at some point, or it could be next year being CEO of America's superstars. And it's just all that.
I like the sound of that.
Well, it could be interesting. As long as we could get paid for doing it, that would be awesome, right?
That'd be great.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed yourself. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed learning your perspectives and hearing from you. And I'm a big fan, and I'm sure now a lot of folks in my network and that get my newsletter will be a big fan of yours as well. So anything we can do to help you out, please let us know. And anybody, after you hear this, go check out Meg Murphy. What's the website? Just make sure we can get it all out there.
www.megalegamurph.com. It's MEGALEGAMURPH. There's a long story behind that nickname, but there you go.
That's for another podcast. Well, again, thanks a lot for joining me today.
I appreciate it. This has been so much fun.
All right. Take care.
Have a good day.